I know you're in the home. Just come to the door.
Not here.
Lady, don't play the game. You ain't gonna do that. Don't do this. Never. Ma'am, stop. Stop it. You're not gonna stop us from entering the house. Open the door.
Stop.
All right, we'll just come in. 31, come to the front. Ma'am, stop resisting us.
During the early morning hours of May 11th, 2024, Tampa police received an emergency call from 18-year-old Natavia Sanders, who said that she had just regained consciousness after being strangled by her mother.
911, what is the address of the emergency? Okay, and what's going on?
I just want to get strangled. But I just woke up from passing out.
Okay, I'm sorry, what happened?
I was strangled.
Okay, by who?
My mom.
Officers responded to the scene where Sanders' mother, 38-year-old Rotesha Silveus, initially refused to come to the door. She finally answered after police knocked for 6 minutes, and Natavia was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The victim died 2 days later, and investigators concluded that she had succumbed to injuries she sustained while being strangled. Following a brief struggle at the crime scene, Silveus was arrested on initial charges of resisting an officer with violence and aggravated battery with great bodily harm. She was later charged with first-degree murder and remains in custody at the Hillsborough County Jail as she awaits the outcome of her case. Number 30. Antonia Quesen. While responding to a call about an injured male along a nature trail in Moon Township, Pennsylvania, in October of 2024, officers found 44-year-old off-duty state police officer Benjamin Brallier suffering from stab wounds to the back, hand, and upper chest. He died from his injuries, and authorities arrested a 25-year-old suspect the following day. Brallier didn't know his attacker, Anthony Quesen, who has since come out as transgender and goes by the name Antonia. The victim was out for a run along the Montauk Trail when Quesen attacked him for reasons that remain unclear. Following her arrest, Quesen underwent months of court-ordered psychiatric treatment at a state hospital. One expert testified that the defendant understood the facts of the case but suffered from persecutory delusions toward men, which impacted her ability to have a rational understanding of the charges she faced and her potential options in court. In late August of 2025, Quesen pleaded guilty but mentally ill to Brallier's murder. She's currently awaiting sentencing, which is scheduled for November, and has been named as a person of interest in a similar murder of an elderly woman that took place along the Empire State Trail outside Albany, New York, in April of 2024. As of February of this year, no arrests had been made in that case due to a lack of evidence, and it remains unclear whether investigators plan to file criminal charges against Quesen. Number 29. David Huff.
How's it going, man? You got ID on you by chance? What's your name? Hey, turn around.
Happened in the area.
A horrific double murder shook an entire community in upstate New York on March 17th, when police found 32-year-old Yoraldith Schutte and her boyfriend's preteen son Jeremiah Huff dead from gunshot wounds inside a Syracuse home. A surviving victim identified the shooter as his stepson, 43-year-old David Huff, who also happened to be Schutte's boyfriend and Jeremiah's father. Huff's stepfather told police that David had pointed a 12-gauge shotgun at him and that the only reason he survived was because the weapon jammed or ran out of ammunition. Schutte and Huff had been dating for a short period after meeting on social media. Following this shooting, authorities revealed that Huff had no domestic violence-related priors and that they had yet to establish a motive for the double homicide. Huff is facing 6 charges, including first-degree murder, second-degree murder, attempted murder, and criminal possession of a weapon. According to a news update from late July, the accused killer's attorneys are seeking a psychiatric defense. Records show that Huff is being held without bond at the Onondaga County Jail as he awaits an upcoming hearing in late September to discuss the results of a mental evaluation. Number 28. Tonia Haddix. The star of HBO's Chimp Crazy docuseries, 55-year-old Tonia Haddix has landed in additional legal trouble after gaining notoriety for saying her chimpanzee, Tonka, died when he was really locked in her basement. Her ongoing legal saga began in 2016 when animal rights group PETA accused her of mistreating her primates, including Tonka, who starred in the 1997 film Buddy. Tonka was among many chimps who were found in Haddix's Lake of the Ozarks basement in June of 2022 after she testified that they had passed away and been cremated. In March of this year, Haddix pleaded guilty in federal court to perjury and obstruction of justice for lying about Tonka's death. She had also failed to comply with previous court orders to improve her chimp's living conditions and had hidden Tonka at a facility in Ohio to further her claims of his death before federal agents removed 6 other apes from her home. Haddix and her husband, Jerry Aswegan, were arrested in July after they failed to show up at multiple scheduled court hearings. The pair are accused of dodging the more than $220,000 settlement that they were ordered to pay Petter in the civil case. In a statement following Haddix and Aswegan's arrests, Petter attorney Brittany Pete said that 33-year-old Tonka has been moved from his cage to a spacious sanctuary where he's thriving. In early August, Haddix was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison, with a Department of Justice official stating that her punishment was not about her involvement in the exotic animal business, but about her willingness to lie under oath in front of a federal judge. Number 27. Matthew Kinne. On a spring morning in 2019, 32-year-old mother of 4 Dominique Clayton was found murdered in her Oxford, Mississippi home. She had been shot in the back of the head, and the findings led to the arrest of her boyfriend, 38-year-old Oxford police officer Matthew Kinne. Just months earlier, the police department had named Kinne as its Mounted Patrol Officer of the Year. He was charged with capital murder for Clayton's death, and his mental health soon fell at the center of the case. Kinne's defense attorney requested a court-ordered mental evaluation and an analysis of his condition at the time of Clayton's murder, but any mental illness-related claims failed to mitigate culpability for his crime. He pleaded guilty as charged in July of 2021 in order to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life without parole. Number 26. Allysandra Blea. On August 23rd of 2025, Las Vegas police responded to a 911 call about an accidental shooting from 20-year-old Allysandra Blea. Officers arrived shortly before 5 in the morning to find Blea's boyfriend, 23-year-old Mark Gorn, lying on the sidewalk with a gunshot wound to the neck. Life-saving efforts were undertaken, but Gorn died from his injury and was pronounced dead at the scene. According to a press release, Gorn was snapping pictures of Blea while she posed next to a vehicle with a gun, which accidentally discharged during the photo shoot. Polaroid found that the scene reportedly showed Blea holding the gun to her mouth with her finger on the trigger, and the witness records seeing the young woman pointing the gun at Gorn but didn't see her pulling the trigger. During the investigation that followed, police discovered disturbing social media posts by Blea regarding her love of firearms, including comments about amassing her own arsenal, shooting people in the face, and stating that she wished she could shoot people and get away with it. Following Gorn's death, she was arrested on 1 count of open murder and booked into the Clark County Detention Center, where she remains held without bail after pleading not guilty to the charge. Number 25. Zaaina Asra Zakirrah Mahvish-Jammeh. While working at a homeless shelter in Brattleboro, Vermont, in April of 2023, 36-year-old social worker Lisa Rosen Pritchard was hacked to death with a hatchet and a knife by one of her clients. Identified by police as 39-year-old Zaaina Asra Zakirrah Mahvish-Jammeh, the accused killer had just purchased a hunting axe a few days earlier. The suspect, who uses they/them pronouns, was charged with first-degree murder following Rosen Pritchard's death, and the case has repeatedly met with delays due to concerns surrounding her competency and mental health. Just weeks after the killing, Mahvish-Jammeh underwent an evaluation and was deemed temporarily incompetent to stand trial. They were ordered to undergo treatment at a state psychiatric hospital for 90 days with the goal of restoring their competency, and the order was extended for another 90 days before state authorities successfully argued for a 1-year involuntary hospitalization order. In May of 2024, the court determined that Mahvish-Jammeh was no longer in need of inpatient care. The defendant was transferred to the custody of the state's Department of Corrections and is currently being housed at the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility. Her motive for stabbing Rosen Pritchard remains unclear. Number 24. Alan Fry. In January of 2024, 43-year-old Alan R. Fry fatally shot his stepfather, 62-year-old Brady Fredrickson, at a home in La Crosse, Wisconsin, during an argument over a coat. He then broke down a bathroom door and pointed the gun at another household member, who had barricaded herself inside the room. Later that evening, officers found Fredrickson dead in his living room, while firefighters responded to a structure fire that investigators would later determine was likely connected to the homicide. In the meantime, Fry showed up at the Mayo Clinic emergency room and told security he had a gun. In late July of 2025, Fry pleaded no contest by reason of mental defect or disease to second-degree intentional homicide. The judge overseeing the case sentenced him to 35 years in a psychiatric facility, and the case could be subject to periodic review depending on Fry's progress. Number 23. Matias Maltos-Saucedo. In what seasoned prosecutors have described as one of the worst cases they've ever seen, 59-year-old Felipe Martinez and 70-year-old Antonio Martinez were brutally murdered in Waco, Texas in March of 2023 during an argument with their son over an air conditioner. Officers arrived at the couple's blood-covered residence to find Antonio nearly decapitated. The suspect, 25-year-old Matias Maltos-Saucedo, was arrested at the scene and later indicted on a capital murder charge. He reportedly admitted to stabbing Antonio with a knife after getting upset with him during a verbal disagreement about the household appliance. Saucedo said that his mother tried to stop him and that he also stabbed her because he wanted to kill her. In May of 2024, the defendant was deemed incompetent to stand trial in order to undergo treatment at a mental hospital. The decision came after a court-appointed expert concluded that he has no rational understanding of the charges against him and remains a threat to society. According to records, Saucedo suffers from depression and substance abuse and has said that he would stop taking his medication if he was no longer under a court order to do so. The order was extended for 60 days in April of 2025, and in July, the judge overseeing the case ordered Saucedo to spend up to another year at the facility. Number 22. Jamal Jackson. 35-year-old Anthony Mele was out to dinner with his wife and young daughter at a Ventura, California steakhouse in April of 2018 when he was targeted in an unprovoked act of violence. The family had just finished eating and Mele's daughter was sitting on his lap when the homeless assailant, 49-year-old Jamal Jackson, attacked seemingly at random. Mele was rushed to the hospital where he underwent emergency surgery before succumbing to his injuries the following day. In the meantime, witnesses chased Jackson to a nearby beach where he was arrested by responding officers. Hours earlier, law enforcement had received a call about Jackson behaving disruptively in public, but all of the officers on duty were busy with other matters. Instead of responding to the scene, the department monitored the suspect's activity using surveillance footage and concluded that he posed no danger to others. Following Mele's death, Jackson was charged with first-degree premeditated murder. He pleaded not guilty and was ordered to undergo a competency evaluation following repeated courtroom outbursts. The defendant was repeatedly deemed incapable of assisting in his own defense and has spent the last several years in a mental hospital, with the court's latest one-year order to treatment being issued in late January. Number 21. Darren Pronto. 26-year-old Emily Hamann was mercilessly slashed to death in January of 2021 while walking along the Riverwalk in downtown Bennington, Vermont. For reasons that remain unclear, the suspect, 32-year-old Darren Pronto, was accused of lying in wait before jumping on the victim and cutting her throat, leading to a first-degree murder charge. In December of 2022, Pronto was mandated to involuntary psychiatric care after undergoing 2 mental evaluations and being deemed incompetent to stand trial. He had recently been diagnosed with schizophrenia, according to his sister, and was initially ordered to spend 90 days in treatment. Pronto remained hospitalized until April of 2023 when he was discharged from care and released into the custody of the State Department of Corrections. Records show that he's currently incarcerated at the Southern State Correctional Facility in Springfield. Number 20. Mirna Bolanos. During the late summer of 2013, police responded to a call at the Hopatcong, New Jersey home of 30-year-old Mirna Bolanos and her 56-year-old mother, Legia Bolanos. The two had gotten into an argument over Mirna's alleged refusal to take her psychiatric medication, and the responding officer drove Mirna to a taxi service. The next morning, police were called back to the residence where they found Mirna sitting outside with blood running down her legs. Inside the home, officers found Legia's lifeless body in a pool of blood with her fractured skull exposed. She had been bludgeoned to death with a baseball bat, and Mirna was charged with murder and 2 weapon-related counts. Following a bench trial in late 2015, the judge overseeing the case found Mirna not guilty by reason of insanity. The ruling was made after experts for both the prosecution and defense testified that the defendant was incapable of understanding the wrongfulness of her actions when the crime occurred. Mirna, who had been hospitalized for psychiatric reasons on several previous occasions, was ordered to undergo a risk assessment and other evaluations to determine the appropriate level of care for her mental health issues. Number 19. Mark Russell. An argument over a broken cell phone escalated into deadly violence in January of 2020 when Mark Russell beat his girlfriend's mother to death with a golf club at the victim's Fort Dodge, Iowa home. Officers discovered the body of the victim, 45-year-old Angela McLeod, while responding to a reported altercation at the property. Shortly after his arrest for first-degree murder and prior to his arraignment, Russell wrote to the court stating that he wanted to plead guilty because he was more capable of fighting his case from within prison. He then wrote a letter stating that he wanted to plead not guilty, and the conflicting pieces of correspondence raised concerns over his mental state. Russell reportedly had a documented history of schizophrenia and had recently been hospitalized for having auditory hallucinations. He had also been released from prison the month before the killing after serving time for an unrelated offense, and had previously been accused of assaulting an officer, assaulting an intimate partner with a knife, and stealing a car. Following McLeod's death, the judge ordered Russell to undergo a competency evaluation, but the case ultimately went to trial in February of 2023, resulting in a guilty verdict and a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Number 18. Russell Phay. On May 21st of 2025, a man later identified as 42-year-old Russell Maxwell Phay broke into the Montecito, California mansion of Ty Beanie Babies tycoon Ty Warner. He barricaded himself inside the residence and beat 60-year-old financial services executive Linda Malik Aslanian into a coma. Phay was charged with first-degree attempted murder, residential burglary, kidnapping, assault through force likely to produce great bodily injury, and resisting, delaying, or obstructing a police officer. He pleaded not guilty to all counts and was ordered to undergo a competency evaluation to determine if he's capable of moving forward with his case. During one of his initial court hearings, Phay swore at deputies and members of the media. This behavior was unsurprising to his family, who told NBC News that they had recently tried to warn the authorities of their fear that he might hurt someone. Phay reportedly suffers from schizophrenia and has accrued a criminal record in multiple states since his diagnosis, which was followed by increasingly erratic behavior. Despite this, he was ruled competent to stand trial in June, and the case appears to be ongoing. Number 17. Jovante Darling. Just a day before his girlfriend was due to join him at their new home in St. Petersburg, Florida, in April of 2024, Pennsylvania transplant and father of 3 Timothy Pustelak was found dead inside his apartment with multiple stab wounds. The 49-year-old victim had met a violent end during an incident that began in the bedroom, where a handprint on the wall was later matched to a 31-year-old suspect named Jovante Darling. Darling, who already had a lengthy criminal history under his belt, was charged with second-degree murder. According to police, he and Pustelak knew each other and were arguing when a deadly altercation broke out between them. At the time of his death, Pustelak had recently started a new job in Clearwater as the sales director of a waste management plant. 8 days after he was killed, authorities arrested Darling on a first-degree murder charge. Prosecutors announced their intention to seek the death penalty while the court ordered Darling to undergo a mental evaluation. The defendant was deemed incompetent to stand trial but likely to regain competency within a 6 to 12-month period. He's currently receiving treatment at a state hospital while awaiting an upcoming status hearing, which will determine if his condition has improved enough for the proceedings to resume. Number 16. Cedric Robbie Jones. In the first murder case to strike the Athens, Georgia area in 2024, 48-year-old Willie Antonio Jewell was found shot to death inside a Winterville home. On a February morning after intervening in a family dispute, officers made the discovery while responding to a reported domestic dispute involving a son yelling at his mother. As they approached the home, they were frantically flagged down by 2 female witnesses who identified a 26-year-old household member, Cedric Robbie Jones, as the alleged shooter. According to police, Jewel had gone to the home to mediate a disagreement between Jones and his mother. He was reportedly trying to de-escalate the situation when he was shot in the head. Jones was arrested at the scene and later charged with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony. In October of 2024, he was ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation after his defense attorney filed a notice of intent to raise the issue of a possible insanity defense. While updates on the matter have not been forthcoming in recent months, records show that Jones remains held without bond at the Clark County Jail as he awaits the outcome of his case. Number 15. Aaron Rodriguez. While attempting to sell her grandson's computer through Facebook Marketplace in May of 2021, 54-year-old Melissa Miller made plans to meet with a potential buyer at her Glasgow, Tennessee home. Little did she know the customer was not interested in doing honest business and was using an alias, and she was shot to death when the planned transaction went awry. Later identified as 24-year-old Aaron Rodriguez, the suspect shot Miller from the passenger side of a vehicle that was being driven by a female accomplice. Miller was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital, and Rodriguez was subsequently charged with her murder. If convicted as charged, the defendant could have possibly faced the death penalty. The defense fought to eliminate this as an option, arguing in court that Rodriguez suffered from serious mental illness and had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder following an evaluation. Prosecutors opposed these claims, and in 2024, Rodriguez pleaded guilty to murder and first-degree robbery. As part of a plea deal which spared him from capital punishment, he was sentenced to 40 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Number 14. Naomi Elkins.
I gotta just pat you down with the back of my hand, okay? Do you have anything on you, anything you're concerned about? Any sharp objects? Anything at all? Nothing like that? Okay. What's that? We're gonna have a female search you properly once we get to headquarters, okay? Where's the husband is MIA. I don't know where he is. Apparently someone's trying to reach him. Are there any other kids? As far as they know now, I don't know how they confirmed it, but that's all it said. They only are aware of 2.
In late June of 2024, a 27-year-old Lakewood, New Jersey woman named Naomi Elkins was accused of stabbing and drowning her 2 toddler daughters after returning home from her shift at a local daycare center. She later told police that she had prayed for religious reasons before killing her kids, and that she believed she'd be ridding the world of evil by committing the heinous act. Following her arrest, Elkins was charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 gun-related counts. She reportedly had a documented history of severe mental illness, prompting her defense attorney to question whether her ailing mind played a role in her alleged crimes. The judge ordered her to undergo a psychiatric evaluation, and court-appointed experts concluded that Elkins was suffering from psychosis and religious delusions when she killed her kids. Following a bench trial in the spring of 2025, she was found responsible for her children's deaths, but not guilty due to insanity. The judge sentenced Elkins to 2 life terms at a psychiatric hospital, but she could see freedom again if and when she is deemed to no longer pose a threat to herself or others. Number 13. Toby Smith. In September of 2018, a pair of Good Samaritans caught a man named Toby Smith assaulting an elderly woman at her home in Canosa Lake, New York. They restrained the suspect until police arrived at the residence, where they found 83-year-old Lorraine Gempler suffering from injuries sustained during an armed assault. Gempler died from her injuries, and Smith, who lived down the street from the victim and claimed to have no memory of the attack, was charged with second-degree murder, first-degree burglary, and second-degree assault. A psychiatric expert later testified that the defendant suffered from mental illnesses that prevented him from fully understanding the nature and consequences of his actions, including schizoaffective disorder. According to the evaluator, Smith was increasingly unable to distinguish between reality and fiction as his psychosis escalated prior to the killing. But these claims failed to hold up in court, and in 2019, the accused killer was found guilty of murder, attempted murder, and 2 weapon-related charges. Smith received the maximum prison sentence of 40 years to life, but passed away just a few years into his sentence in 2022. Authorities stated that the inmate died after receiving emergency medical care, but did not publicly reveal a cause of death. Number 12. Spridal Hubiak. 52-year-old Angela Bragg was murdered by a colleague just days after Christmas in 2023 while working at a liquor store in Waterville, Maine. Surveillance footage showed the victim's co-worker, 21-year-old Spridal Hubiak, turning off the store's lights and attacking Bragg from behind before stabbing her in the neck. He fled the scene and was captured 4 days later while sleeping in a flipping Arkansas parking lot. Describing the homicide as a thrill kill, prosecutors bolstered their case against Hubiak using his own journal entries, which included plans to kill Bragg and a confession to the crime. In August of 2024, the defendant tried to plead guilty to the murder, but the judge rejected the plea and ordered Hubiak to undergo a competency evaluation. Hubiak pleaded guilty for a second time 2 months later after reaching a plea deal with prosecutors in order to avoid a life sentence. He was sentenced to 65 years in prison, which fell in line with the prosecution's wishes, while the defense argued that the punishment was excessive and amounted to a de facto life term. Number 11. Vanroy Evan Smith. 58-year-old emergency room doctor Michael Mamone was riding his bicycle to work in Dana Point, California in early 2023 when he was fatally struck by a white Lexus sedan. The driver, later identified as 39-year-old Vanroy Evan Smith, proceeded to stab Mamone to death with a large knife and was detained by witnesses until police arrived. Smith was charged with murder with special enhancements for lying in wait and using a deadly weapon. He pleaded not guilty despite having made a jailhouse confession to the crime, and went on a bizarre biblical tirade during his arraignment hearing, calling himself the King of Kings and stating if they knew who I was, they would let me walk out of here. They would fulfill all my desires. During an equally strange jailhouse interview with the Orange County Register, Smith denied being mentally ill and said he had a right to kill Mamone because the victim was in the crosswalk and presented himself, given the defendant's unusual behavior and mental health history, which included at least one recent hospitalization. The court ordered him to undergo an evaluation. The matter dragged on for nearly 2 years before Smith was deemed competent to stand trial in January of 2025, and the case appears to be ongoing. Number 10. Jon Burnett. In June of 2019, sheriff's deputies in Barry County, Michigan, responded to calls from passers-by who reported seeing a bleeding man lying in a ditch. They attempted to help him but were driven away by a gun-wielding assailant who pointed the weapon at them and ordered them to leave. Responding officers were unable to save the victim, 21-year-old Bryce DeGood, who had suffered a fatal gunshot wound. A second victim, 73-year-old Gary Peak, was also found shot dead in a nearby home. Police accused the suspect, 64-year-old John Otis Burnett, of killing both men and trying to strangle DeGood's wife. Investigators were never able to determine a motive for the double homicide, leading them to theorize that the defendant acted out of anger and vengeance. Burnett was found guilty of 34 charges in August of 2020, including 2 counts of first-degree murder, 10 counts of felonious assault, 16 gun charges, assault with the intent to murder, unlawful imprisonment, and 2 counts of resisting and obstructing a police officer. He was sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he'll never harm an innocent civilian again. Number 9. Edwin Alemany. In late July of 2013, a Boston, Massachusetts man named Edwin Alemany attacked 3 women over a 20-hour period, leaving one of them dead and injuring the other 2. After assaulting his first victim, Alemany attacked 24-year-old Amy Lord in the vestibule of her apartment building shortly before 6 o'clock in the morning. He forced the woman into a vehicle and drove to 5 different ATMs while ordering her to make cash withdrawals totaling $960. Alemany then took Lord to a secluded area where he beat, strangled, and stabbed her over 40 times before leaving her to die unclothed in the wilderness. He stole Lord's car and set it on fire before going on a spending spree with her money, buying lottery tickets and splurging on an evening of food and drinks with friends. In mid-2014, Alemany's defense attorney announced plans to rely on an insanity defense. An expert later testified that the defendant was manipulative but not mentally ill. Alemany was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, and his subsequent attempts to challenge his case have been unsuccessful. Number 8. Omega Plaisime. On May 23, 2022, Kentucky State Police responded to an ongoing shooting investigation in Oak Grove, where 18-year-old Galen Toller of Clarksville, Tennessee, had been gunned down during the early morning hours. They identified 2 suspects, including 20-year-old Tyler Holt, who turned himself in to law enforcement and was charged with complicity to murder. His co-defendant and the accused shooter, 21-year-old Omega Plaisime, was charged with murder. Both defendants were released on GPS monitoring in September of 2024 while awaiting trial, but Plaisime's supervision was revoked in March of 2025 after he was caught tampering with someone's car while intoxicated. and wearing a damaged monitoring device. In addition to the murder charge he was already facing, he was hit with additional counts of violation of conditions of release, tampering with a prisoner monitoring device, second-degree criminal mischief, and public intoxication. The trial appears to be delayed indefinitely, with the latest postponement coming after Plaisime's defense attorney successfully argued for a court-ordered mental evaluation in April. According to the most recent available news update on the case from May, new defense attorneys have joined the case while the court awaits the results of Plaisime's psychoanalysis. Number 7. Karolina Zurawska. While responding to a home in Swansea, Wales, in late August of 2024, officers discovered the murdered body of a young boy named Allysandra Zurawska, who had been hacked to death with a handsaw. Police arrested the victim's mother, 41-year-old Karolina Zurawska, who was also accused of trying to kill her father, 67-year-old Krzysztof Siwi, on the day of Alexander's murder. During an initial court hearing, Zurawska's defense attorney said that they planned to seek psychiatric reports on the defendant, who appeared to be suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. Siwi later testified that his daughter had displayed alarming behavior prior to Alexander's death. On the day of the murder, Zurawska approached her father and said, "Dad, I must kill you," before slashing him in the neck. Earlier this year, Zurawska pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility and attempted murder. She was hospitalized indefinitely and will receive treatment until she's deemed a non-threat to society. Number 6. James Kilroy. In June of 2019, an unclothed former park ranger named James Kilroy was spotted wandering in a field in County Mayo, Ireland, prompting a response from law enforcement. He was taken to the hospital for a mental evaluation. In the meantime, Gardaí had discovered the murdered body of Kilroy's wife, mother of 3, Valerie French Kilroy, who had been brutally beaten, strangled, and stabbed repeatedly with a kitchen knife. During questioning, Kilroy said that he was on a mission from God to kill his wife, who he believed was turning into a zombie, but that he couldn't remember if he had fulfilled his mission. He claimed to believe that it was the year 2024, which was still 5 years away at the time, and said that he felt like he had aged 50 years in one day. Kilroy expressed no remorse for his actions and said that he had no choice when asked if he believed killing Valerie was right or wrong. A psychiatric expert concluded that he was not suffering from mental illness, but he nevertheless pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity to the murder. But a jury rejected Kilroy's defense and he was convicted of the crime following his third trial in June of 2024, resulting in a mandatory life prison term. Number 5. Levi Aron. A Hasidic Jewish schoolboy named Levi Kletsky vanished in July of 2011 while walking home from his school's day camp in Brooklyn's Borough Park neighborhood. 2 days later, his dismembered body was found inside the apartment of 35-year-old Levi Aron and a nearby dumpster. Police traced the crime to Aron through surveillance footage, and he gave a written confession following his arrest. He was subsequently charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. Despite his admission to the crime, the defense fought to mitigate his consequences in court by highlighting Aron's history of mental illness and a recent diagnosis of schizoid tendencies, including hallucinations and hearing voices. But Aron was ultimately deemed competent to stand trial, and he struck a plea deal with prosecutors during the summer of 2012. As part of the agreement, he admitted to a reduced second-degree murder charge and second-degree kidnapping in exchange for a prison sentence of at least 40 years. According to prison records, he'll become eligible for parole in the year 2049. Number 4. Robert Kessler. In a case that has languished in Florida's criminal justice system going on 4 years, 47-year-old Stephanie Crone Overholtz was brutally murdered and dismembered in November of 2021. Her partial remains were found by fishermen who later described seeing an older white man dropping bins and garbage bags into McKay Bay off the state's west coast. Several more body parts were recovered over the next several days after witnesses spotted them floating in the water. Crone Overholtz had recently been reported missing by family members in Pennsylvania following the discovery of her body. Investigators paid a visit to her last known address, in Lutz, where they spoke with the homeowner, 69-year-old Robert Kessler. They were quick to notice that he resembled the description of the man who was seen dumping the victim's remains. Kessler said that Crone Overholtz had stayed with him for several weeks after they met at a McDonald's restaurant. He claimed to have no knowledge of her whereabouts and that he couldn't remember when he had last seen the woman or where he himself had been in the days since she went missing. Law enforcement's suspicions were heightened when Kessler said that he had thrown Crone Overholtz's belongings out after she left them at his house. Police received crucial information from Kessler's young daughter, who said her father had asked Crone Overholtz to leave during an argument. She overheard Crone Overholtz asking Kessler for money and saying that she'd leave if he paid her. Kessler told his daughter to go to bed, and she never saw the victim again. The information gleaned during the interview helped lead to the discovery of the missing woman's car, along with surveillance footage, which appeared to show Kessler abandoning the vehicle at a shopping plaza. Kessler was further implicated in the murder through blood and DNA evidence, leading to charges of murder and abusing a dead body. The case has been met with delays due to concerns regarding the defendant's mental state, but is scheduled to finally go to trial next year after Kessler was deemed competent to proceed. In the meantime, he remains held without bond at the Hillsborough County Jail. Number 3. Juniper Bryson. In September of 2024, a 21-year-old Texas woman named Juniper Bryson was accused of trying to sell her newborn baby to the highest bidder in a Facebook group for hopeful adoptive parents who are looking to connect with birth mothers. In a post written on her behalf, a relative wrote that she was located in Houston but willing to travel and that she was trying to prevent her child from ending up in foster care. According to authorities, Bryson had indicated in a recent conversation with a family member that her unborn son would test positive for drugs. During the discussion, she reportedly said she wanted payment for the infant so she could get an apartment or buy a car and become a DoorDash driver. Bryson interacted with at least 7 different people who expressed an interest in adopting her child, including a woman named Wendy Williams, who attended Bryson's labor believing she would be taking a new baby home. She stayed at the hospital for 3 days, during which time she bonded with the newborn child who tested positive for drugs. After signing legal paperwork giving her decision-making power in the baby's life, Williams learned through the grapevine that Bryson had been seeking payment for the infant and was unexpectedly escorted out of the hospital. She contacted Child Protective Services, who got the police involved, and Bryson was soon booked into the Harris County Jail for the sale or purchase of a child in lieu of a $30,000 bond. Williams remained hopeful that she could still adopt the baby, but he was instead placed in the care of a friend of the defendant. Today's topic was requested by River Parish. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Cherez Davis. A back-to-school event at the C.W. Williams Community Health Center in Charlotte, North Carolina, erupted into gunfire on a Saturday afternoon in August of 2025 when a woman fired multiple shots in an attempt to break up a fight. The suspect, 34-year-old Cherez Davis, reportedly admitted to discharging the weapon when another adult intervened during an argument between her son and another boy. According to police, she reached into her backpack, pulled out her handgun, and fired 2 warning shots into the air before putting the gun back in her bag and walking away, causing a crowd of over 100 people to disperse in all directions. Following her arrest, Davis was charged with going armed to the terror of the people and carrying a concealed firearm. She was released from jail after posting a $50,000 bond, and the case appears to be ongoing. Number 1. Christopher Thomas. A northern Michigan woman's worst nightmare came true in October of 2022 when a man who had been stalking her for over a decade abducted her from her home. Samantha Stites and Christopher Thomas had met while attending college in 2011. Thomas mistook the young woman's attempts to make him feel included as her having deeper feelings. He became obsessed with Stites, even after she made it clear that she wanted to be left alone. Stites hoped the stalking would end after college, but Thomas followed her to another state and continued harassing. She was granted a 6-year order of protection against Thomas in 2014, during which time he continued to stalk her from afar. As soon as the order expired in 2020, Thomas began contacting Stites again. He also hid a GPS tracking device on Stites' car and followed her almost everywhere. Unaware of how he always seemed to know where she was at all times, Stites became increasingly concerned the more she ran into Thomas. She petitioned to renew her order of protection in 2022, but the court denied her request, citing a lack of sufficient evidence. On the day of the kidnapping, Thomas took Stites to a storage unit that had been repurposed as a soundproof bunker and chained her to a wall. For 13 hours, he assaulted and tortured his captive, who eventually convinced him to release her by promising not to go to the police and that they would stay friends. In late 2023, Thomas pleaded guilty to kidnapping, torture, and aggravated stalking. He was sentenced to 40 to 60 years in prison and will have to wear a GPS ankle monitor for life if he's ever released. Stites told Up North Live that she believes that similar crimes can be prevented in a number of ways, including through better communication between courts and survivors and more mental health support for troubled individuals like Thomas. In the aftermath of the case, the state changed its policy to require judges who review petitions for orders of protection to consider the circumstances in any past protective orders that have been issued between the parties. Thanks for watching. Would you rather wake up tomorrow 10% smarter or 50% better looking? Tell us why in the comments below.